to be the man. You gotta beat the man.
Shadows sleeping in the dead of night. I light the match, they fear my fight. Street I flicker like a war zone flare. They see me rise, but they won't dare. Some man cracks under my stride. Whispers chase me, they collide. Gun dreams heavy like gold chains. Every sorrow that screams my name. Be legendary, feel the fire in your chest. No second guessing, this is your test. Be legendary, break the cage and run. The crown's not given, it's won, it's won.
Yep, that's right. Welcome to another episode of the Hoosier Legends Weekly Podcast. I am your co-host, Justin Spears, joined as always by Mr. Mike Walden and special guest appearance, Ellie the cat. As you can see on my shoulder here, she hates it when I'm gone, and I've been gone a whole lot here lately, so she snuck her way up into my recording area, and I didn't have the heart to kick her out tonight, so she is making a special guest appearance here with us this evening. But, Mike, how we doing tonight?
Hey, doing great. Caught me on a night where I got home from, a great senior night wrestling, and then was able to catch some 8th grade basketball between Tri-West and Speedway.
Nice.
So it was nice. It was good to be out there supporting the kids and, watching my kid play a little ball. So It's a good night. Plus, it's a Thursday, right? So one more day of school.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a little crazy here this week for us, being it's our winter homecoming week. So we got a big pep session coming up tomorrow. The Tri-West Bruins boys basketball team will be in action against Guerin Catholic. So that'll be a fun weekend. And then, as we were talking about off air, Mike, and this is what we're going to kind of kick off the show with this evening, the HLC has a very, very important winter sports weekend coming up here, as we have a conference for both wrestling, boys wrestling, and for swimming, co-ed swimming. And so we're excited to kind of see what's going to happen there. I have boys participating in both of those events. So we'll kind of wait and see. We're going to start off at wrestling at Speedway. And if time allows, we might possibly head down toward Indian Creek for swimming in the afternoon. I think the way that conference is being run is diving is going to occur first in the morning, and then at some point swimming will kick off. So that's a little bit of a track from Speedway down to Indian Creek to watch a little bit of swimming. But if we can make it, we will. So let's kind of start off on the wrestling side. Again, conference, all 6 teams being represented. I don't think it gets talked a lot about, and I know that neither you nor I are huge, wrestling aficionados. Even with my son wrestling for Tri-West, he's fairly new to the sport. He started his sophomore year. So I'm still learning a lot in terms of the wrestling community and kind of, powerhouses and what to expect and things of that nature. But boy, there's actually a lot of great teams here this year in the Hoosier Legends wrestling roster. Monrovia has a really solid program. They took down Plainfield a couple weeks ago in a duel. We went down and wrestled in a duel against Beech Grove earlier this year, and they're a really solid program across the board. Speedway's always got a couple of really solid wrestlers and a pretty deep roster. And then from what I've seen out of Indian Creek and Triton Central, they both are putting up and racking up a lot of wins. So I really think that this conference meet on Saturday is going to be really, really exciting to see which team comes out on top and which wrestlers and which weight classes are going to shine. And that's the thing too, Mike. Again, I don't know if you've seen a whole lot of wrestling before. It's so weird because, it's like you and I both like football. We both like basketball, that kind of thing. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you start thinking about football programs, right, you think about teams that have had a lot of success. Oftentimes we talk, for example, about like a New Pal, obviously like Warren Central in the Indianapolis area, Carmel, Brownsburg, that kind of thing. And then, you might think of like some smaller schools and you might go, oh, they're not real great. You can't really do that with wrestling, right? The wrestling team for that school may be really good, but they may have a couple really good wrestlers in a couple weight classes that, they might be state bound as wrestlers. And so it's kind of, you almost go in and you look and sometimes you see a team and you go, they're probably not going to be very good because they're not good in a lot of other sports, but sometimes they surprise you there.
Yeah, you never know, man. And it's so hard to really understand how a high school athlete is going to show up that day. You know what I mean? There's so many things that happen where girlfriend breaks up, they don't make weight. You know what I mean? It's such a hit and miss thing. But usually the cream rises to the top, and those kids can, especially, I think we've talked about this in the past episodes. I'm not real sure, but when you start to specialize, and we've seen a lot of specialization, those kids who've been wrestling since 3 years old, and that's all they do, you don't realize that when you're just looking at, oh, this school is really good at football this year. You don't realize they have a 113-pound wrestler that's won state 3 years in a row. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you just never know what's happening, with those other sports and how much work those kids are putting in.
Yeah, absolutely. And the rise of wrestling clubs too, especially I know out here on the west side, I know everybody's got them in and around the area, but Contenders in Brownsburg is a huge wrestling club that is growing. And I know they've got north side, south side locations now. There's another club in Avon, Red Cobra, that works with a lot of kids in the Hendricks County area. It's a growing sport. It's real popular. You hop on Friday night, Big Ten usually has, a couple of matches on. You can catch it on the weekend now too. You've got the Real American Freestyle wrestling organization that's kicked off, and it's really starting to grow in terms of the interest of youth sports and that kind of thing. So yeah, the numbers are on the increase. We know the girls side just recently sanctioned as a full sport. They've got their state coming up, so we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that we do have some representation from the HLC in the girls state side. I shouted that out on the rundown earlier this week. So I think Beech Grove has 4. I know Triton Central has 1. Indian Creek has 2. And I think Speedway has a representative in the girls' state coming up tomorrow. They run that on Friday. So, good luck to those ladies wrestling there tomorrow at the state. I believe that is at the Cortiva field house at the fairgrounds. So that ought to be an exciting day there. And good luck to all those girls. But yeah, conference wrestling, going to be a lot of fun. Going to be really interesting to see, again, which team out of the 6 HLC teams that will be represented there will come out on top.
What's your prediction there, Justin?
Just kind of based on what I've seen so far this year on depth, I think it's going to come down to either Monrovia or Indian Creek. I have not followed along a whole lot with the Braves. We haven't seen them. It's really weird. We're still kind of in this transition thing, right? We were talking about this today at school. I was talking with our boys and girls tennis coach, and then I know you came in at some point in on the conversation as well. The scheduling aspect, especially for some of these, I don't know what the better word is to say it. I coach golf, lesser sports. Like, I don't know what's the word you would call, like, not
country club.
Country club. I mean,
I don't know if wrestling's considered country club, but that's tend to be what they call it.
Yeah, like swimming, tennis, golf, that kind of thing. To put together a schedule, right, for an AD with a new conference this year, especially with those sports, you have to be cognizant of travel costs, things of that nature, just finding dates and things like that. It's like, where are you going to put your energy into? So I don't blame necessarily the ADs for it, but it's like, when I look at my schedule, I'm still, for the most part, set to play a Sagamore-based schedule. Majority of my opponents for next season are old Sagamore. I play Monrovia, I play Speedway, but I don't play Beech Grove, Indian Creek, or Triton Central in the regular season. Now I will see them in our conference tournament, but I don't see them in a dual or a three-way. My point to all that was, in wrestling, I've noticed that too. We tend to go north a lot, right? So I know we went to Terre Haute one weekend as a replacement for a tournament that got snowed out earlier in the year. But like, we go to Lafayette. Jeff, we used to go up to Rochester for a tournament. We did go out to Greencastle this year, so maybe just a little bit further west. But my point is like, we don't go that far south where a lot of our HLC teams are. So I haven't really kept up with, other than the duel that we had with Beech Grove, like Triton Central or Indian Creek, just other than to see the scores that have been reported through X and whatnot. So yeah, I really think it's probably, from a team perspective, going to come down to Monrovia or Indian Creek. I don't know. I've heard a lot of good things about Indian Creek, and so we'll see. Maybe they'll come out on top. So,
you got any individual wrestlers that you're really excited to see?
Oh yeah. Well, again, I know our roster the best, and so I can speak specifically to Jermaine Johnson and Eli Ogle, who I believe are both still undefeated on the season. They've kind of bounced around a little bit in terms of what they've wrestled during the regular season versus, I think, what they'll kind of start to hone in on here as we get closer to sectional time. I think the hope is that Eli would go, if I'm not mistaken, at 120. But I know he's had some trouble hitting that weight mark this year. So I think he's wrestled a majority of the season closer to the 126. I think Jermaine has been wrestling at 120 then. And I think, again, ideally, they want him at about 113. So I'm guessing they're going to settle at both those boys there at 120 and 126, if I had to guess. But I don't know what that will look like as we get closer to sectional time. I know that Indian Creek had a couple of wrestlers, I think, that were ranked in the top 10 in their regional. And then I think the way that the rankings are always kind of put out for individual wrestlers is either by regional or semi. They might start with semi-state ranked. I think that's where they kind of start off with, and then as things kind of weed down closer to state, they'll rank them out there. But yeah, I've seen some names pop up out at Triton Central as well. But yeah, those are the ones that I know the most. I know I just saw Monrovia has a wrestler, and I'm completely blanking on his name right now, who is a pretty solid. I want to say he's at about like 138, 144, somewhere in there. So yeah, I would not be shocked one bit if we don't see pretty good, solid representation from the HLC once we get into postseason tournament. I know that we go to the Avon sectional, which is always a very tough one to advance out of. There's a lot of very, very well polished teams that are in that sectional. So we'll see how the other teams fare in their sectionals. But I would not be shocked to see a pretty hefty dose of HLC wrestlers moving on through the state tournament. So
good.
Yeah. And then, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's pretty exciting to see that, we have such a strong wrestling conference. It's, and I'm not going to go into it, but it does suck, though, for most of us when for Tri-West, when we have Brownsburg and Avon in our sectional. It's hard to advance when you're going against past state champions.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when you look at Brownsburg, who I guess if you want to say they're down a touch this year, it's not by much. I mean, obviously they were ridiculous the last couple of years with their depth. They might be down a touch, but they just finished up basically they tied with Crown Point at Team State for 4A. Crown Point won it. From what I understand, maybe on criteria, I didn't get to see everything. But yeah, I mean, they're a really, really solid program. Avon's got a couple of really good kids in their program. Like I said, Plainfield's a really solid program. Speedway, Pike Pike's in that sectional, and Pike has, I think, 3 or 4 kids that are always, sectional and regional on into semi-state and state bound. So yeah, I love watching this postseason, but you're right, it's just incredibly hard for some of our kids to be able to advance out. But yeah, I'm excited to see it happen. So we'll definitely bring you guys the updates early next week after we get to see the way everything shakes out there at Speedway. Saturday morning, I believe wrestling kicks off at 9 o'clock. So down on the south side, a little bit further south there in Trafalgar at Indian Creek, we'll have swimming, and the HLC has 4 of its 6 teams with swim teams. I believe Triton Central and Monrovia both do not have swim teams, so the others will all be competing for that conference title. Again, it's always kind of hit and miss with these as to the numbers of what you'll see represented from each of the boys and girls sides. Like, for example, I know that for Tri-West, the boys team is pretty deep in terms of numbers. The girls team's a little bit thinner, but those girls compete their hearts out. And I wouldn't be shocked if they don't make a run to try to make some noise and finish the top 1 or 2 there in the conference. Again, I have not had a chance to see Indian Creek. Beech Grove came out to us and swam against us in a duel earlier this year, which I believe Tri-West won. And we did, I think we split with Speedway. I believe our boys defeated Speedway, their girls defeated us. So again, if you're kind of thinking about, and I don't know much about Indian Creek in terms of their swim program. I have looked for their results on Meet Mobile, which seems to be kind of the go-to as far as finding results for swim meets. But just like with everything else, just like what we use USA Wrestling for, if the meets aren't placed into Meet Mobile, then there's really nowhere else other than sometimes the school's athletic website will post team results, but you don't really get much in the way of individual times or names or anything like that. So I would imagine that Indian Creek probably has a pretty solid team, seeing as they're hosting. I would imagine their pool's probably decent size, and they probably have pretty decent numbers there. So going to be really, really fun to see. Boys team is pretty good from what I've seen as we've traveled around and watched meets this season. I know we've got 3 or 4 really solid swimmers, whether you call them our A team or I don't know exactly the way that they seed the times. I know that our relay teams on the boys side and some of our individual swimmers are pretty solid. We've got a pretty good distance swimmer on the 1,000-meter free. We've got pretty good backstroke and free teams, relay teams are solid. So I would expect Tri-West boys to push for the conference championship and maybe be able to win it again. Caveat to all of our friends down at Indian Creek, I don't know much about their swim team down there, so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, good. With 4 teams, you just never know. And I know I'd say I know, but I'm pretty sure that when we were in the Sagamore, we competed, but I don't think we ever really won anything in swimming, did we? I think Crawfordsville tend to always get us on that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? I mean, you get a I don't know if you want to call it like a legacy program or just like a program that has built a really, really solid, farm system. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here in a moment. Obviously the clear cut example, which is just a no brainer, is Carmel swimming, right? I mean, that's just, beyond ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, you can find these regional pockets, whether it's golf, swimming, tennis, wrestling, you name it, even volleyball. You can find these areas, right, where there's just really strong participation at the youth level. There's buy-in, there's consistency, all of those ingredients that kind of feed into a successful, program. When the youth see the success that the older kids are having, right, it sets the tone and showcases to them what needs to happen in order for them to achieve that success, and that gets passed down and carried on too. So you're right. I don't know that we ever really had a lot of team success, in the Sagamore. So it would be really nice to be able to come in and claim at least one of the sectional or conference, if not possibly even both of them on Saturday. That would be really good for the Tri-West program. All right, let's move on then. So good luck again for both those conference meets. Let's real quickly here, Mike, if you want, I can run through our current conference standings for both boys and girls basketball. And then we can, again, I want to kind of use a springboard of what we talked about earlier here to discuss a little bit of that idea and concept of, feeder programs and youth programs. So let's kind of start with the girls' side. There hasn't been a ton of change since the last time we had a show for you last week. As I looked at the schedule, it looks like all of the games that have been played have been non-conference games. So the only thing that's going to have changed since last week's show will be, for the most part, the non-conference schedule. But on the girls' side, we've got Monrovia atop at 3-1, 14-5 overall. We've got Triton Central at 2-1 in conference, 13-3 overall on an 8-game win streak. And I want to highlight them here in just a little bit. Beech Grove at 2-1 in conference, 11-7 overall. Indian Creek 2-2, 8-11 overall. And then Tri-West at 1-2, 9-7 overall, and then Speedway at 0-3, 8-7 overall. So I think, Mike, as you pointed out last week, all but one team in the conference with an overall winning record, right? So that's important there to highlight. That's great. We talked about the depth of this conference. You've got 3 teams atop of the conference standings that are in double-digit wins already, with several more games left to be played before sectionals kick off here pretty soon. But man, that Triton Central team at 2-1 in the conference, winning 8 in a row. Their average margin of victory right now is 26.3. Now, wow. I will say this, the thing that, and this is not a knock on them in any way, shape, or form, but they did play in the Shelby County tournament here recently. And I was talking to Coach Walkie at school, who's our tennis coach, and I looked at it and I thought, I know there was a period of time where at the Hendricks County tournament, because it was just recently played as well, there was rumors that Brownsburg was going to back out of participating in basketball, both boys and girls, from what I understand, in the Hendricks County tournament. Reasonings vary, don't really care. I don't think they ever did skip out. I think they've played in it every year to my knowledge. But Shelbyville does not play in the Shelby County tournament. So I say that to say that in the Shelby County tournament, Triton Central defeated Southwestern 66-10 in the opening round, and then beat Morristown in the championship game 66-19. So that's going to skew that average margin of victory. But, to kind of give them credence as well, you still got to win those games, and you still go out and you put your boot down on their neck and you don't give them a chance, right? So mission accomplished there. Either way.
Sorry, Coach. Shelbyville is what, like a 4A in basketball?
Yeah, I think that's right. Mm-hmm.
And so, all those other schools are just too small for them to play, and it's not worth it. Did they go through a big winning streak down there?
Yeah. Sorry, you were cutting out there a little bit, but yeah, that's my assumption is, and they do have usually, at least on the girls' side, I think the boys' side, they're a little bit more up and down. But I took a look at their girls' team. Traditionally, historically, they've had a pretty solid girls' team. So that's probably my guess, would be the same kind of rationale that I think I had heard starting to come from Brownsburg is we're not getting anything by playing in this tournament. We're giving up games to play, smaller schools. And then it comes down to, we already play Avon in our conference. And so then it would really just be a matter of, does Plainfield have a good enough team? But I'll tell you what, when you look at those county championships, it's not exactly like Brownsburg's dominated, right? I mean, it's kind of been spread around over the last decade amongst, Danville. Plainfield's been hot the last couple of years. We even had, I think, one in there in like the mid 20 teens, maybe like 2016, 2017. I think we took it. So it's not like they've completely dominated, which I think is kind of maybe why they kind of came back to earth a little bit on that take and, decided, which is good. It's good for the county, right? You love those kind of natural non-conference or even sometimes conference rivalries that can take place for a county bragging rights. So, yeah, I don't know what Shelbyville's justification wholly is for that.
Yeah, I mean, it would just make sense if, I get it. You're a two-way Triton Central, but, if you're just continuing to beat these schools by letting up 10 points, 19 points.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you playing it? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I understand that completely, and you never know when those teams have a good game or a good team. Maybe it's worth it. And you can get beat, but I don't know. It's always nice to have a trophy. Always nice to have a number, but as you said, sometimes we were talking about that, and Walkie brought that up. That 30-30-30 rule, that 33-33-33 rule,
Mm-hmm.
where 33% of your games you want to lose. I say that quote unquote like you should lose because they're
Mm-hmm.
better talented, bigger schools. You know what I mean? So you can see the competition out there. 30% of the games, it's going to be a 50-50. You might win some, you might lose some, and then 50% or the other 30% would be games that you're supposed to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe those Shelby County games are tune-up for them, right? They're the easy wins, but gets them ready for, the harder games, making sure that the offense is flowing, work on little things here and there. Who knows for that? But, as you were saying earlier, it's tough, I think, to really kind of schedule matches and schedule people who you think are really going to be beneficial towards you.
Mm-hmm.
Because and you're talking about this, and I was wondering, for basketball or for, let's say, for golf too, would you want to, one, I don't know if we even play a conference tournament, but would you want to play all the conference teams earlier in the season and then play a tournament near the end of the season, or just play them all at the end of the season? It all depends, and I know it's new and we're trying to get everything ready, but
yeah,
and maybe but so I'm just thinking, for you as a golf coach, do you really want to go play at Triton Central's golf course?
Mm-hmm.
Do you really want to go to Indian Creek, or would you rather go play some really tough teams? And I'm not saying that they're not tough, don't take that away, but like you were talking about, like up in Lafayette County where you're playing a really nice golf course up there, or Speedway has obviously one of the best golf courses in the state. Scheduled meets with them makes sense, because you want to challenge your kids on golf courses, right? Not necessarily who they're playing against, or is it kind of both? Which one are you trying to look for?
Yeah, it actually, I think it is a little bit of both. And then I also think it kind of boils down to where are you in the pecking order? Like, are you the front runner, or are you like in the middle of the pack, or are you just kind of like having a really rough year rebuilding, whatever the situation might be? I know last year, my perspective, I think we were kind of the front runner in the Sagamore to get the Sagamore Conference Championship, which we ended up doing. So for me, as a coach, I liked seeing those teams for a couple of reasons. Number one, since we were kind of the front runner and we were able to beat those teams in dual meets or three ways during the regular season before we saw them at conference, I think it is a little bit of a head game, right? So now you do kind of maybe put a bullseye on your back too, right? So the guys maybe that are chasing you are a little bit more fired up and out to try to show you, but you've built a little bit of confidence up, your opponent. For me, though, too, what you talked about there, Mike, and this is more important for golf than maybe it would be for obviously anything else, is the exposure to the course, right? So, like, I was really trying to lobby to get a match with North Montgomery out at Rocky Ridge, which was where our conference was prior to conference, because I wanted the boys to go out there and play around where they could manage, looking and taking notes about where they needed to be positioned on the course with each of the holes, even if we just played the front or the back. It didn't end up happening. Thankfully, most of my boys on the varsity team had played out there before, and we took them out there for a practice round too. But that's really kind of, course management so important in that regard. So when you're looking at, that kind of a situation, I think it's more of, you want the experience of not only being able to play the team, but then the course, right, as well. So like for me, I want absolutely to have at least one or two matches at my sectional course, right? And we were, unfortunately, we weren't able to get that to happen last year because our sectional's so far out in Attica that, we're not going to make a regular season trip, like to your point, out to play out there. Again, we were able to play a practice round. But when we went up and played Coyote Crossing, that's our regional course up in Lafayette. We played that toward the end of the season, and I absolutely think that helped us at regional. We had a goal to finish in the upper half in regional, and I think having played there earlier in the year helped prepare the boys for what to know that they were going to need to do to execute playing up there. That I think helps out a lot.
Where is, have you looked, do you know where conference is going to be at this year?
I think it's at Smock, which is a Indianapolis public course down on the south side. It's a nice course. It's a girls' regional course. And so it's a nice city course. It's one of those courses that you can go out and score a little bit, but you can also get into trouble too. So you got to manage again the course. And so, that's going to be my big, not to get off on a huge golf tangent here that I've already gotten off of, but that's going to be my message to my boys this year is, it doesn't matter where we show up to play. We've got to play smart golf, right? We've got to play within ourselves, and we've got to learn, how to manage our rounds, whether they're 9-hole, weeknight meets or 18-hole invites. We've got to avoid blow-ups, and we've got to manage, these smaller, these keeping our scores as low as possible by managing our round and being smart. So, that's what I'm really looking forward to and excited to. I would love to be able to play, better competition to kind of tie it back to what we were talking about with the girls basketball side. But it is what it is, right? I mean, at some point you can only play the team that's in front of you, right? We always talk about that in terms of like, oh, they've got a weak schedule. Well, you can't really help that sometimes, right? I mean, what if teams having 2 or 3 teams on your schedule are having down years? Then your schedule looks really weak, even if you intended for it to be stronger than it was, And again, just to kind of tie back to what we were talking about with Triton Central, they're on an 8-game win streak. Not only did they take care of business in the Shelby County tournament, but they then came out and beat New Pal Tuesday night by 1 point.
Crazy.
And then, that New Pal team's 12-5. So, I mean, they're playing really, really good basketball. So again, that just shows that they have that mindset. And I'm sure coach has instilled it in. Doesn't matter if we're playing Southwestern one night and then we're playing New Pal the next. We're going to play Triton Central basketball, right? And so they are taking care of business. And so again, kudos to them. Monrovia, another team that's playing really good basketball. I was excited to see Tuesday night they played a really good Edgewood team who is currently I think they're like 13-5 or 14-3 or something like that. No, they're 12-3. They came up just short, but that game is going to serve Monrovia a lot better, right, in terms of what they're going to learn and take away from that than if they were to play Eminence or I don't know, Clay City or some smaller rural school. I mean, you can learn even in those losses and continue to play good basketball. So a lot of good stuff there on the girls' side. Let's flip over to the boys' side here real quick, and then we'll transition into our final topic for the evening. Mike, Triton Central, as we said before, there hasn't really been a whole lot. The end of the season is loaded with conference matchups, so we're still seeing this kind of segment of the boys' schedule where there's a lot of non-conference matchups that are still being played. But currently, we've got Triton Central at 1-0, 10-2 overall. They're on a 4-game win streak. Monrovia is at 6-4, 1-0 in conference, 6-4 overall. They've won 2 in a row. Tri-West, the Bruins are currently 2-1 in conference, 7-5 overall. They've lost a couple contests here. Beech Grove, 2-2, 5-9. Mike, I made a comment in the rundown. That team has to have a black cloud over their head right now. Listen to this. They have lost 5 in a row. They lost by 5, 2, 2, 2. And then last night they lost to Lawrence Central by 12, which is, I mean, Lawrence Central's 4A school. They're a powerhouse in basketball. But before that, right, 2-2, they had lost 3 games in a row by 2 points. I mean, you talk about Coach Sanders having to do a miracle coaching job to keep the boys' spirits up. That's just tough luck right there.
Yeah,
And
and
then,
hopefully, hopefully that builds some mental toughness too, knowing that they're always going to be in, and never to give up. You don't know what's going to happen, especially in the early season like that. If they're losing by 2, Karma's got to flip that around for them. Hopefully, in sectionals and regionals, right?
Yep. Yeah, you just keep chopping wood, pounding sand, whatever analogy, you want to use. And eventually, like you said, karma's going to flip that around and you're going to win one of those close games, having learned the lessons of what you went through in losing those close ones. Speedway, to wrap out the bottom 2 here, Speedway 0-1 in conference, 4-6 overall, and then Indian Creek 0-2, 3-8 overall. So again, still a lot to be decided in the conference. It's going to be fun down the stretch here. It does look like Triton Central has separated a little bit. We know that they've got that one big win over the Bruins, who are 2-1 in conference, but don't count out Monrovia and Coach Barber. And again, I mean, Beech Grove at 2-2. Heck, even Speedway at 0-1, right? I mean, they're just one game out of first place in the conference in all reality. So, yeah, still way too early to call much here. We do have a big night coming up tomorrow night. They're all out of conference matchups, but we've got Garin coming to Tri-West. That's winter homecoming for Tri-West. We've got Heritage Christian traveling to Triton Central. That's going to be a good matchup. Heritage Christian's currently 7-2 on the season. So that's going to be a good contest for the Tigers. You got Monrovia at Covenant Christian. They are currently 6-3. Coach Flatt's been over there for about 2 decades. He coaches them up over there at Covenant. That's always a good matchup. And then Traders Point at Speedway. Hopefully that'll be a game where the Spark Plugs can get back into the win column. So the Speedway game is set for 7. The other 3 games are set for 7:30. And then we've got Beech Grove at Burbuff Saturday afternoon. Burbuff's 5-5 on the season, so maybe that will be an opportunity for the Hornets to get back in the win column. And then Indian Creek is off this weekend, so that's kind of an overview there of what's going on the basketball side. So, Mike, I know we were talking a little bit about this, and I want to kind of wrap up the show tonight by going through this because I think it's something that, again, we would love to be able to kind of get some feedback. If any of you guys are out here, listening and want to chime in on this, let us know what your thoughts are. We throw these topics out there not just for us to talk about, but to generate conversation in the community, amongst the HLC schools and beyond. And so, if you're listening to this and you hear this, let us know what your thoughts are on this. So I'll set this up and then I'll kind of turn it over to you. We were kind of talking a little bit earlier this week about the concept of youth leagues, right? And what they've traditionally meant to specifically a lot of smaller schools. But even I remember as a kid growing up playing youth basketball and football and baseball as a kid in the community. Obviously, I'm a little bit older, predating the date of travel ball being all the rage. but that kind of since then, as travel and club and has come up, and it doesn't really matter what sport you're talking about, right? There seems to be kind of these elite high level programs that kids that have aspirations of getting into middle school and high school and wanting to dominate with their school team, that they're involved from an early age at these club travel programs. What is that doing to the state of community-based athletics, youth leagues within these smaller, suburban and rural communities? And I kind of hypothesize that the more that you push kids into these elite type leagues, even though they're not elite level players, they're playing on a B team or a C team, their money that they're paying to be a part of that organization is funding the upper levels of those travel, organizations. And it feels like all the money stays up to the A team and that kind of thing. But more kind of to the point, you're taking those kids who are actually more youth league type kids, pulling them out, and it's draining the resources, and there's not the numbers to be able to run a full league or a competitive league. And so then you develop this gap, right? There's a floor, and the floor's falling out. And so these kids who are being pushed into travel and club that are really maybe solid good, or would maybe be, really good in a youth league, are, lower level travel players. They're seeing the writing on the wall that they're not going to make it into, being in the rotation when they get into high school. And so they're not getting developed either along the way, right? They're just going out and playing a bunch of games. They're not getting coached up and taught the fundamentals and techniques. And so when it comes time for that high school crop to get there, right, it's been dwindled down to maybe 2 or 3 players per class. And then everybody else is kind of saying, this isn't worth it. So my point, and I guess what I want to kind of get your input in on this, Mike, is, is it important? Should we make it a point of emphasis in these smaller communities to have a solid, vibrant youth league to keep numbers up, to teach kids the fundamentals, and then maybe as they progress into upper elementary and on into middle school, they maybe hit a growth spurt. Maybe they get stronger. Maybe they get faster. Maybe they, start to kind of pass up some other kids that they were traditionally behind. And now you've got a deeper roster of kids to be able to choose from.
That would be the ultimate goal, is to always have kids who love the program and who love your sport. And yeah, a lot of things were crossing my mind as you were talking there. I was thinking about the 8th grade basketball game that I went to yesterday at Triton Central, where, Tri-West ended up winning by 15, and they always had control of the game. But it was a lot closer, than that 15 points at the end, right? Triton Central played really tough defense, but not to get into all the basketball stuff that was happening on the court, but I will say that Triton Central did a very good job of playing all of their players. I think they had like 14 kids on the team. We played, I think, 7 kids, right? Until the last 2 minutes when we were up by 15 and kids got to be put in. I think Triton, most of their kids probably played, no less than like 2 to 3 minutes throughout the game, right? And not just we're getting beat or we're winning, let me throw you in for garbage time, right? And I know you've talked about that in the past, that the head coach at Triton Central, both boys and girls basketball and the football, they have a program. They talk to the youth league, they talk to the middle school, they run the offense, they run the defense. This is how the head coach wants it, so that when they come up to high school, they already have the expectations, they already have the know-how to just get right in there and go. And I think that's probably one of his things is, I don't care if you win or lose, and I truly mean that. I want these kids to play. I want every single one of these kids to play basketball, right? And that's not at Tri-West. That's not what's going on, right? And that's not on Strine, that's not on the 8th grade team. I'm just saying in general.
Mm-hmm.
And this is 8th grade. I mean, this is varsity down, right? Our parents expect wins. You know what I mean? Um, for almost every sport, everything that we can think of, they want wins. And when coaches in the youth league say, hey, I'm going to focus on the fundamentals, I'm going to focus on how to tackle properly so the kids don't get hurt, I'm going to focus on this or that, and that doesn't get wins, you know what I'm saying? And then the
Mm-hmm.
other team, is getting all the wins and they don't practice anything and they just give it to their best player and let the best player score touchdowns or the best players make baskets. And everybody wants to be on that team because they're winning. And that's, what I mean? So I don't know where that is. I don't know if that's the mindset of the parents. I don't know if that's the mindset of the kids. And then that's because of the parents or because kids know when they win or lose and they want to be on a winning team and they don't understand that they're actually getting better while the other team's not getting better.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, you would think that it would start with the head coach. The head varsity coach has to have long-term buy-in for the community.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a lot of different coaches and a lot of different years, for instance, like Tri-West boys basketball has had a new coach every 2 years for the last, 3 or 4 coaches or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could be
Mm-hmm.
wrong on that, but I feel like that's true.
Yeah.
We had Glunt for a year, then we had somebody else for 2 years, and now Strine's on his second year.
Mm-hmm.
So none of them are buying into the youth, right?
Right.
They haven't been here long enough. They don't know what they're going to do in the future. So they're just like, okay, let me coach high school basketball, and then we'll do some youth stuff, but I don't know if I don't know if I have a lot of buy-in from the head coach yet. You know what I mean? Because he doesn't know, right? And I'm not trying to hate on Strine. I'm just saying in general, that's just how it's been.
Right.
Same way with the youth football, right? The head coach has one night where he sees all the kids, and that's about it. And
Mm-hmm.
then and I know some of the coordinators, and probably the head coach too. I'm not trying to take that away from him. We'll have conversations with the youth league and say, hey, this is the kind of offense we want. This is kind of what we want to work on. But then ultimately, you know what I mean? Like no one's policing that, and
Mm-hmm.
then you don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
So it's obviously like everything that we talk about, it's convoluted, and there's so many different things about it. Uh, in the specialization of the sports, it's if I want to be a good, let me step back. I would like to say right now, Justin, on record, overall, I would say these current high school teams are better than the high school teams that we were part of.
Mm-hmm.
And let me take that back again. The individuals on the team are better than the individuals we had on our team,
Mm-hmm.
athletically and more experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about teams wise, right? Because a team
Right.
is a whole different concept. I
Right.
think they're so much better, you know what I mean? Uh, Top down, that it's hard for us to kind of realize what it's even like to be a basketball player because of all the specialization training, for all the experience they have. Our top guys maybe played AAU, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but a lot of times they picked up the basketball in the summer and in the winter, and that's it. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Or they would go out and play with their friends to play basketball. They go to the park and play, group games at the park, unorganized basketball.
Right.
And maybe that's where we were better at, was the unorganized and the unorthodox ways of playing. And these guys are a lot of strictly coached. You have to run this play, and they don't have the freedom to make up their own plays sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
just, I know I'm talking a lot. I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of different reasons why youth leagues are important,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I believe that some of those kids need a bigger challenge to push them at a
Mm-hmm.
higher level. So I'm not mad at the All Stars. I'm not mad at taking a group of 7 or 8 kids from one class and traveling and doing a lot more on a Sunday like a Sunday showcase type deal.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you take them out of the youth league, then all of a sudden they're not as connected to the youth, and their friends aren't as connected to them.
Right.
And there's something missing for that whole atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. And there's two things that you said in there in your response that resonated with me that I wanted to highlight on, and I'll throw it over you to wrap it up. Number one is the importance, the emphasis, whatever you want to call it, on wins and losses, right? We just see it so much today with the hyperization of the desire to win, and we've talked about that before. Where I'm on Facebook quite a bit. I've got a lot of friends and whatnot, associates in the community who have had their sons and daughters play, travel, and every weekend, right? It's them showcase up at Grand Park. Hey, team came in first. Everybody's huddled around home plate or cutting the nets down or putting the rings up, and it's like all that just gets instilled. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, right? I mean, you want to get the kids to understand what winning means, what it feels like, how important it is, but we can't do that at the behest of or at the loss of understanding what it means to lose as well. I always think of that quote from Moneyball when Brad Pitt is playing Billy Bean. He says, I think he says something about the fact that I love to win, but I hate to lose. I hate to lose more than I love to win. Right. And so it's like understanding what a loss is, that you learn from it, that you get better from it, that it's a process, right? A loss is a feedback loop that you learn from. When all you do is go out and win nonstop, you're winning probably, consistently because your superior talent, whatever it might be, the competition isn't as good. But when you lose, it's a feedback, right? Something didn't go right. What didn't go right? What do we need to work on? What do we need to learn to get better, right? You're pushed out of your comfort zone, right? When you're losing because you're not doing what it takes to win. And you need to be slapped with reality, right? To say, look, this is what we need to do to win. So I think that we've got to kind of tip the scales of the balance back a little bit in terms of understanding that, hey, it's not the end of the world if your son or daughter doesn't stand in front of home plate or cut down the nets or doesn't get named tournament MVP or whatever it might be. That's okay, right? We've got to get that. The other thing that you mentioned in there too that I think is important is you talked about the kind of the athlete today versus back when we were in school. And I think again, kind of as a symptom of that winning culture, it's all about what is my son or daughter doing? Are they the stud on the team? And if they're not getting the recognition or the playing time or the stats or whatever metric you're using to determine, where they are in the pecking order of the roster that they're on, we see people taking their ball and going home when, their kid isn't getting all of the glory, right? We've talked about that before. I love that phrase. It's amazing what can happen when nobody cares who gets the credit. Every good coach maximizes the talent on their roster and gets and squeezes every ounce of energy and productivity and, utilizes those athletes in a way that helps the team win. Now what that takes is buy-in to get those kids to understand, right? That, hey, you know what? Maybe you're going to be the team's leading scorer. Maybe we're going to lean on you to put the ball in the bucket, right? But you look at the other kid and you say, I need you to distribute the ball. I need you to not turn the ball over. I need you all to go out and collectively play team defense and rebound. You kind of get the kids to buy into what their roles are. And when they do that, right, then they're playing as a team and not disconnected as 4 or 5 all-stars that have been brought together from different travel teams and club sports. And then now all of a sudden they don't know how to play a role, right? Because they're used to being the man. And when they're not the man, right, then they melt down. They don't know how to take it. And then the parents melt down because they don't know how to take it, right? And that's, again, I think a contribution of why we're seeing those numbers, right? We're seeing the number of kids transfer increase, right? Call it whatever you want. That's essentially what a lot of times is boiling down to, right? When a kid says, I'm not happy in this situation, well, then do something about it. Be the agent of change. Don't run away from the problem, right? Do something productive about it. But yet we're seeing more and more kids constantly transferring out or just leaving their sports altogether. And I think a lot of that stuff, factors into that as well. So that's kind of where I fall on that. Is there anything else that you want to throw in there to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we both said it. It's buy-in, and you know, kids and parents both have to understand that losing is good. Um, we all want to win the championship, but to get to the championship, it'd probably take a couple losses just for you to learn. Learn to lose, learn to, you know, that it's not always going to be great, and to overcome obstacles in life, right? And when we can say, hey, the goal is not to go undefeated in high school or in middle school. The goal is to win your conference, to win state, or the goal is just to become the best basketball team that we can be, and not have goals that include championships, but include goals of, 2 or less turnovers, like metrics that you can say, hey, we were the best team that this is, we hit all of our goals here or there, because you can't really control who you're going to play against, but you control how you play. And just to kind of flip it and make it to where it's not about wins and losses, it's about getting kids to enjoy the game. And I think that's the one thing that we try to instill, but man, we're America and we want to win and we want to be number one.
Yep.
But if we could just instill the love of the game, I think we're going to be better off. And, and that's for society and everything. It's, dude, I don't care if we win or if we lose. I want you to go out there and have fun. You know what I mean? And yeah, like you said, winning's fun. Not losing's even better, right?
Right.
But, it's a cultural thing, and it's something that we're going to have to get used to. And I think it's also a pride thing for kids where they don't want to get cut. They don't want to make the freshman team. They want to make varsity as freshmen. They want to be considered the stud. And like you said, they just don't understand how important it is just to be a team player.
Right.
If I have a kid that scores 40 points a game, but we're losing every game, and if I can cut that down to him having 15 points a game, but more assists, and we start winning, that's way more valuable. But that kid's going to be upset because he's not scoring 40, right?
Yeah, right.
And that's the kind of mentality that we have to get rid of. And that comes from mom and dad, and that comes from coaches.
Yep.
Top down, explaining this is what we need to succeed.
Right.
And I think maybe at that top level, at the collegiate level, that's what they need to say too, and keep telling parents, hey, I'm not going to recruit a kid who's scoring 40 points a game with 0 assists. Give me the kid that has 15 points a game, can see the court, gets 10 assists, helps his guys up, plays strong defense. That's what I want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's a formula that it seems like Painter's put together up at Purdue, right? And I would love to see maybe that get copied more, right? Because he is a guy that gets buy-in from guys that know their role and, understand, like what you said, all of those little things that go a long way into helping the wins come more organically, as opposed to, I can't imagine they're sitting in the team locker room and they're going, all right, we need to get Braden, we need to get Trey, we need to get, these guys a certain number of this, and this, and that if they're not getting it, as long as they get gut out wins and, they're being successful as a team, I think any of those guys would say that's the mission, right? All the other stuff will fall into place. But that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And that's the kind of buy-in I'd like to see, more programs take stock of. So.
Isn't that funny though? And I feel like that used to be the recipe for championships, and I think it still is. But we've had so many teams, especially with the ones and dones era, that were winning championships, like you said, having 4 or 5 guys from a different travel team all come together and play. 4 or 5 McDonald's All-Americans on the team, right?
Yep.
But I think it's played out over all these years. A team wins and not individuals. You'll get them every once in a while, but UConn, great coaching, they'll win. You know what I mean? You've seen it, like you said, with Painter the last couple of years. Great coaching, that team wins. You look at IU, really since Bobby Knight. I mean, and there's been a couple other coaches in there that's done this, but if you're not creating an atmosphere where kids enjoy to be there and have an expectation of what winning looks like, you're not going to win. They've tried the one and dones, they've tried all these other stuff, and they keep firing different coaches. And that's to take it on a way out of scale, and not the same, but the same is it's sad to see Mike Tomlin for the Pittsburgh Steelers retire, especially on the note where, people wanted him gone and that he's been there too long. 19 years as an NFL head coach is absolutely amazing. And it makes you wonder how many more organizations could be as successful as the Steelers if they kept a coach and not just try to change a coach every 4 or 5 years. And I know he won one Super Bowl year 2, and the last 17 years he hasn't won a Super Bowl. But there's so many things that go into Super Bowls. And if you're trying to say it's Super Bowl or bust, that's never going to happen, right?
Right.
Unless you have a Tom Brady. And he's just an elite quarterback that can see the field. Patrick Mahomes. I think Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady pretty much win no matter who their head coach is. They're super ultra talented, special people that can win Super Bowls. I don't know how many head coaches win, and Mike Tomlin, I think he only had one losing season in 19 years, maybe. Right?
I don't think he had one. He finished 500 a couple times, but he never had a losing season.
Yeah. And then people still wanted to fire him because he wasn't winning Super Bowls. And it's just like, do you realize how good that is?
Yeah.
But anyways, I know that's off topic, but it's the same thing. It's just like, what is good and what is not good? Yeah, we all want a state championship, but guess what? One team does that.
Right. And
so if your goal is state championship or bust, you're going to be set up for failure a lot.
Yeah.
Why not have other matrix that say, Travis football went 7-4, but they were super successful in building this, or the kids really enjoyed the experience because of that. And that's what it's about, right?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep. 100%.
I don't know.
All right. Well, very well said to wrap it up here. So I think we'll put a bow on this episode. And we, as always, appreciate any kind of support you can throw our way with likes, comments, shares. Talk it up with your friends, family. Let them know about what we've got going on here. The metrics are showing that, we are gaining some traction and that more people are listening. So we really, really greatly appreciate that. Again, if you have any comments, suggestions, or feedback, send it over our way. As we mentioned last week, we are going to potentially try to start throwing in some player interviews and hopefully some coach interviews as well to get perspective from them as well and what they're doing both in season and out of season. So really looking forward to continue to evolve and change the program here. So that will do it for us. Until next week, we will see you on another episode of the
Concrete jungles got upholstered beats. My heart sings, I'm with the city streets. I'm not the hero, I'm the storm they fear. Thunder in my veins, crystal clear. Walls trying to